The fire had taken everything from Willa Kincaid except her life, and some days she wondered if that was a mercy or a curse. She stood behind the counter of the general store in Pyramid City, Nevada, her scarred hands carefully wrapping brown paper around a customer's purchase while keeping her face angled away, a habit she had developed over the past 3 years since the accident. The burns stretched from her right temple down her neck and across her shoulder, a patchwork of healed flesh that made the other women in town whisper and the men look away. It was 1876, and in a place where survival often depended on strength and appearance, Willa had learned to make herself small and invisible. "That will be $2.15, Mrs. Henderson," Willa said softly, her voice steady even as the older woman's eyes lingered on her scars with barely concealed pity. "Such a shame," Mrs. Henderson murmured, though whether to Willa or to herself was unclear. A young woman of 23 and no prospects at all. "My Henry was saying just yesterday that no cowboy in his right mind would choose a woman like you when there are prettier girls to be had." The words stung like salt in a fresh wound, but Willa had heard variations of this sentiment so many times that she had built armor around her heart. She simply nodded and accepted the coins, dropping them into the cash box with hands that trembled only slightly. After Mrs. Henderson left, the bell above the door chiming her departure, Willa allowed herself a moment of weakness. She touched her scarred cheek gently, remembering the woman she had been before the fire that destroyed her parents' ranch house and killed her mother and father while she barely escaped. The door opened again, and Willa straightened immediately, schooling her features into professional politeness. But instead of another gossiping townsperson, a tall cowboy walked in, his boots dusty from the Nevada desert and his hat pulled low over his eyes. He was broad-shouldered and moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew his place in the world. When he lifted his head, Willa found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she had ever seen. "Good afternoon," she said, her hand instinctively moving to shield the scarred side of her face. "How can I help you?" The cowboy removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed a trim and a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and a strong jaw. "Name is Callum Drake. Just hired on at the Silver Creek Ranch outside town. Need some supplies." Willa nodded, grateful for the routine of work. "Of course. What do you need, Mr. Drake?" "Callum is fine," he said, and there was warmth in his voice that surprised her. Most men spoke to her with either pity or discomfort, but his tone was simply friendly. "I need tobacco, some coffee, dried beans, and bacon if you have it." As Willa moved around the store gathering his items, she was acutely aware of his gaze following her. She waited for the inevitable moment when he would notice her scars fully and his expression would change, but when she glanced at him, he was simply watching her work with what appeared to be genuine interest. "You run this place yourself?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "The owner is usually here, but he is visiting his sister in Virginia City for a few weeks. I manage it when he is gone." Willa set the items on the counter and began tallying the cost. "That will be $4.75. Callum counted out the money and then paused, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "I do not mean to be forward, but you have the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen. Like amber in sunlight." Willa froze, certain she had misheard him. No one had called any part of her beautiful since the fire. She felt heat rising to her cheeks, and not the painful heat of burned skin but the warmth of an unexpected blush. "Thank you," she managed, barely above a whisper. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I will be back this way next week. Would you mind if I stopped in to say hello?" "The store is open to everyone," Willa said carefully, not daring to hope that he meant something more personal. "That is not quite what I asked," Callum said gently, placing his hat back on his head. "But I will take it as permission nonetheless." "Good day, Miss Kincaid. Willa Kincaid. Miss Kincaid." He tipped his hat to her and gathered his supplies, leaving Willa standing behind the counter with her heart beating faster than it had in years. Over the next few weeks, Callum Drake became a regular visitor to the general store. He came in every few days, sometimes needing supplies and sometimes admitting with disarming honesty that he simply wanted to see her. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from the weather to their pasts. Willa learned that Callum had come from Texas after his family's ranch was sold to pay debts, and he was working to save money to start his own spread someday. He learned that Willa had survived the fire that killed her parents and that she had been living in Pyramid City ever since, working at the general store and saving what little money she could. What surprised Willa most was that Callum never treated her scars as something to be pitied or ignored. He looked at her fully, seeing all of her, and his interest never wavered. When other customers came in and made their thoughtless comments, she sometimes caught him frowning, but he never made a scene. Instead, he would wait until they left and then say something kind that would make her smile despite herself. One Saturday afternoon, in late September, Callum arrived at the store just as Willa was closing up. The sun was setting over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her of the fire, but also of new beginnings. "I was hoping to catch you," Callum said, holding his hat in his hands. "There is a church social tomorrow after services. I know it might seem forward, but would you consider attending with me?" Willa's first instinct was to refuse. She could already imagine the stares and whispers, the way the other women would clutch their pearls and the men would shake their heads. But when she looked at Callum, standing there with such open hope in his eyes, she found herself wanting to be brave. "I would like that," she said softly. "But you should know that people will talk. They already say that no cowboy would choose a woman with scars like mine." Callum stepped closer, and Willa could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. "Then they do not know the first thing about what makes a woman worth choosing," he said firmly. "I see you, Willa, all of you, and what I see is a woman who survived something terrible and came out stronger. A woman who is kind to everyone who walks through that door, even when they do not deserve it. A woman with courage and grace and those beautiful amber eyes. The scars are just part of your story, and I want to know every chapter." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had not cried in front of anyone since the fire. "You hardly know me," she whispered. "Then let me get to know you better," Callum said. "Starting with tomorrow, I will pick you up at 10 o'clock if that suits you." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice. After Callum left, she locked up the store and walked to the small room she rented above the seamstress shop. That night, she took out her one good dress, a simple blue cotton that she had made herself, and pressed it carefully. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, her life could be more than just surviving. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Nevada sun already warming the dusty streets of Pyramid City. Willa dressed with care, braiding her dark hair and pinning it up in a style that she hoped looked presentable. She could not hide her scars, they were too extensive for that, but she held her head high as she descended the stairs to meet Callum. He was waiting outside with a small wagon, cleaned and polished for the occasion. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "You look lovely," he said, offering his hand to help her up onto the seat. The church was at the far end of town, a simple wooden building with a white steeple that could be seen from anywhere in Pyramid City. As they approached, Willa saw other families and couples arriving, and she felt her courage beginning to falter. But Callum seemed to sense her nervousness. He reached over and gently took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and reassuring. "I am right here," he said quietly. "You are not alone." Those simple words gave Willa the strength she needed. They walked into the church together, and yes, people stared. The whispers started immediately, a susurrus of shocked voices wondering what a fine-looking cowboy like Callum Drake was doing with scarred Willa Kincaid. But Callum kept his hand on the small of her back, steady and sure, guiding her to a pew near the middle of the church. The service was lovely, full of hymns and prayers that spoke of redemption and grace. But Willa found it hard to concentrate with so many eyes on her. Mrs. Henderson was sitting 2 rows ahead and kept turning to stare. The Miller boys, rough cowhands who worked at various ranches around Pyramid City, were snickering in the back. Even Reverend Thompson seemed surprised to see her there with a gentleman caller. After the service, everyone gathered outside for the social. Tables had been set up with food and lemonade, and children ran around playing while the adults talked. Willa wanted to retreat, to make herself invisible as she usually did, but Callum kept her close. He introduced her to some of the men he worked with at Silver Creek Ranch, good cowboys who treated her with respect because Callum clearly expected nothing less. It was when they were getting some lemonade that the trouble started. Margaret Sullivan, a blonde beauty who was the daughter of the town's wealthiest merchant, approached with several of her friends. Margaret had always been polite but distant to Willa, but now there was something calculating in her green eyes. "Callum Drake," Margaret said, her voice sweet as honey. "I heard you were new to Pyramid City. Such a shame no one introduced us properly before you got distracted." The implication was clear, and Willa felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. But before she could say anything, Callum stepped slightly in front of her, his posture protective. "I am not distracted at all, Miss Sullivan," he said coolly. "I am exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with." Margaret's smile faltered. "Surely you know what people are saying. That it is noble of you to show charity to poor Willa, but that you should not let pity guide your choices." "The only thing I pity," Callum said, his voice hard now, "is small-minded people who judge others by their appearance rather than their character. Now, if you will excuse us, Miss Kincaid and I were having a pleasant afternoon before this interruption." He took Willa's arm and guided her away, leaving Margaret and her friends gaping. Willa was shaking, partly from anger and partly from the shock of having someone defend her so fiercely. When they were far enough away, Callum stopped and turned to her, concern written all over his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I apologize if I was too harsh, but I could not stand there and let her speak about you that way." "No one has ever stood up for me like that," Willa said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not since the fire. Everyone either treats me like I am invisible or like I am something broken that needs fixing." Callum's expression softened. "You are not broken, Willa. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. And if the rest of this town cannot see that, then they are the ones who are blind." They left the social shortly after, both of them having had enough of the stares and whispers. Callum drove the wagon out of town, following a dusty road that led toward the mountains. The landscape around Pyramid City was harsh but beautiful, all red rocks and scattered sagebrush beneath an endless blue sky. "Where are we going?" Willa asked, enjoying the feel of the wind on her face. "There is a place I found a few weeks ago," Callum said. "I thought you might like to see it." They drove for about 20 minutes until Callum pulled the wagon off the road near a cluster of cottonwood trees. A small creek ran through the area, its water clear and cold from the mountains. It was a hidden oasis in the Nevada desert, peaceful and private. Callum helped Willa down from the wagon and spread out a blanket under the trees. They sat together in the shade, listening to the gentle burble of the creek and the whisper of wind through the leaves. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, simply enjoying the tranquility of the place. "Thank you for today," Willa finally said. "I know it was not easy facing all that gossip." "I do not care about gossip," Callum said. "I care about you." Willa looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his blue eyes. "Why?" she asked, the question that had been burning in her heart since they met. "Why me, when you could have any woman in Pyramid City, someone pretty and whole without scars or a tragic past?" Callum was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "When I was 17, he said slowly, "I was in a cattle drive that got caught in a stampede. A steer knocked me down and trampled over me. Broke 3 ribs and punctured my lung. The other cowboys left me, said I was as good as dead and they could not spare the time. But one man, an old trail boss named Samuel, he stayed with me, carried me on his horse for 2 days to get me to a doctor. Everyone said he was a fool, that he should have left me and saved himself the trouble. But Samuel said that a man's worth is not measured by how convenient he is to others. It is measured by what is inside him." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "Samuel saved my life, and he taught me to see people for who they really are. When I look at you, Willa, I do not see scars. I mean, I see them, I am not blind, but they are not what defines you. I see a woman who wakes up every day and chooses to be kind, even when the world has been cruel to her. I see someone who works hard and saves her money and dreams of something better. I see courage and beauty and a spirit that fire could not destroy. That is why because you are worth choosing, scars and all." Willa felt tears sliding down her cheeks, and this time she did not try to stop them. Callum reached up and gently wiped them away, his touch tender on both her scarred skin and her smooth skin, making no distinction between the two. "I am falling in love with you," he said softly. "I know it is fast and maybe it is crazy, but it is the truth, and I wanted you to know." Willa's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected to hear those words, had convinced herself that love was not meant for someone like her. But here was this man, this good, honest man, offering her his heart without hesitation. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but it is the truth." Callum smiled, that slow, wonderful smile that she had come to cherish. Then he leaned in, moving slowly to give her time to pull away if she wanted, but Willa did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and new beginnings. They stayed by the creek until the sun began to set, talking and laughing and stealing kisses like young people in love have done since the beginning of time. When Callum finally drove Willa back to town, she felt like a different person than the one who had left that morning. She felt seen and valued and loved, and it made all the difference. Over the next few months, Callum courted Willa properly. He took her on picnics and drives through the countryside. He brought her small gifts, nothing expensive but thoughtful, like a ribbon that matched her eyes or a book of poetry she had mentioned wanting to read. He came to the general store every day, sometimes multiple times, just to see her smile. And slowly, gradually, the people of Pyramid City began to accept their relationship. Some still whispered and judged, but others, seeing how happy Willa had become, started to reconsider their harsh opinions. In December, as 1876 drew to a close, Callum invited Willa to visit the Silver Creek Ranch. It was a sprawling property about 5 miles from Pyramid City, with a main house, several outbuildings, and hundreds of acres of grazing land. The owner, a gruff but fair man named Jonas Harrington, had taken a liking to Callum and was grooming him to be the ranch foreman. "This is beautiful," Willa said as Callum showed her around. The winter sun was bright on the Nevada landscape, making the red rocks glow like embers. "Mr. Harrington has been good to me," Callum said. "He is talking about selling me a portion of the land, letting me start my own herd. It would take a few years to get established, but it is a start." They walked to a rise that overlooked the ranch, and Callum took both of Willa's hands in his. "I wanted to bring you here because I wanted you to see what I am working toward. I know I do not have much right now, just a cowboy's wages and big dreams. But I am saving every penny, and in another year or two, I will have enough to build a small house and start a real spread. And when I do, I want you to be there with me, as my wife." Willa's heart soared. "Callum, are you?" "I am asking you to marry me," he said, his blue eyes shining with love and hope. "I know there will be people who say I am making a mistake choosing you, but they are wrong. Choosing you is the smartest, best decision I have ever made. You are my future, Willa Kincaid. You are my home. Will you marry me?" Willa did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you." Callum let out a whoop of joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both laughing and breathless. Then he set her down gently and kissed her, a kiss full of passion and promise, and forever. They were married in February of 1877, in the same little church where they had attended the social together. Willa wore a dress she made herself, cream-colored with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She did not try to hide her scars with a veil or high collar. Instead, she wore her hair up and her head high. A woman who knew she was loved exactly as she was. The church was surprisingly full. Mr. Harrington came, along with many of the cowboys from Silver Creek Ranch. The owner of the general store, returned from Virginia City, gave Willa away, tears in his eyes. Even some of the townspeople who had whispered about her came, drawn by curiosity perhaps, but staying for the genuine love that was evident in every word of the ceremony. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife and Callum kissed his bride, there was not a dry eye in the church. Mrs. Henderson, who had once said no cowboy would choose Willa, was openly weeping. Margaret Sullivan was notably absent, but Willa did not care. She had everything she needed in the man standing beside her, his hand warm and strong in hers. The first year of their marriage was not easy. Callum and Willa lived in a small cabin on the Silver Creek Ranch while they saved money and made plans for their own place. Willa continued to work at the general store, and Callum worked long days managing the ranch. But every evening, they came home to each other, and that made all the hardship worthwhile. Willa discovered that being married to Callum was everything she had never dared to dream. He was kind and patient, passionate and protective. He made her laugh with his stories and held her when nightmares of the fire woke her in the middle of the night. He never treated her scars as something shameful or ugly. Sometimes, late at night when they lay together in the darkness, he would trace the patterns of healed skin with gentle fingers and tell her she was beautiful. In the spring of 1878, Mr. Harrington made good on his promise and sold Callum 200 acres of land on the eastern edge of the Silver Creek Ranch. It was good grazing land with access to water, perfect for starting a small cattle operation. Callum and Willa threw themselves into building their dream. With the help of other ranch hands, they constructed a modest house, nothing fancy but solid and well built. They started a small herd with cattle Callum bought from various ranchers in the area. By summer, they were ready to move into their new home. Willa stood in the doorway of the little house, looking out at the land that was now theirs, and felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, hiding behind the counter of the general store and believing she would never be more than a cautionary tale. Now she was a wife and a rancher, building a life with a man who loved her without reservation. Happy? Callum asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. More than I ever thought possible, Willa said, leaning back against his chest. Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and this will all have been a dream. It is real, Callum said, pressing a kiss to her temple, right over the scarred skin. You are real and I am real, and this life we are building is real, and it is only going to get better. He was right. In October of 1878, Willa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both her and Callum with joy and a little fear. They were still establishing their ranch, money was tight, and bringing a child into the world was a huge responsibility. But more than anything, they were excited to become parents. The winter of 1878 into 1879 was harsh, with cold winds sweeping down from the mountains and snow that piled high around the little house. But inside, Willa and Callum stayed warm, planning for the baby and dreaming about the future. Callum was attentive and protective, always making sure Willa did not overwork herself. The townspeople of Pyramid City, who had once gossiped about their unlikely marriage, now brought gifts and advice, welcoming Willa into the community of mothers and wives. In May of 1879, Willa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after the trail boss who had taught Callum about seeing people's true worth. Little Samuel had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the moment he was born, he was loved beyond measure. Becoming parents changed both Callum and Willa in ways they had not anticipated. Callum was a natural father, patient and playful, able to soothe Samuel's cries with a gentle voice and steady hands. Willa, who had worried she might not have maternal instincts after losing her own mother so young, found that love came naturally. She sang lullabies her mother had once sung to her and rocked Samuel for hours, marveling at the tiny person they had created. As Samuel grew, the ranch grew with him. Callum expanded their herd and hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Willa managed the household and kept the books, her careful accounting ensuring they stayed profitable even in difficult years. By 1881, they were doing well enough that Callum built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel was a bright, energetic child who loved helping his father with the horses and following his mother around the house. The ranch prospered, and Callum and Willa became respected members of the community. People no longer whispered about Willa's scars. Instead, they spoke of her kindness, her business sense, and her beautiful family. In the summer of 1882, Willa gave birth to twin girls. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth even more so, but both babies were healthy. They named them Rose and Lily, and they were identical in every way except temperament. Rose was calm and observant while Lily was loud and demanding. Samuel, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sisters and appointed himself their protector. With 3 young children and a ranch to run, Willa and Callum were busier than ever. But they made sure to carve out time for each other, stealing moments of quiet conversation in the evenings after the children were asleep. Their love had not dimmed with time and responsibility. If anything, it had grown deeper and stronger, rooted in mutual respect and genuine affection. One evening in the fall of 1883, Willa and Callum were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the Nevada landscape. The children were all asleep inside, and for a moment, there was peace. Callum had his arm around Willa, and she was leaning against his shoulder, content. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Willa asked softly. "If you had never walked into the general store that day." "All the time," Callum admitted. "And every time I do, I am grateful for whatever twist of fate brought us together." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Drake." Willa smiled. Hearing her married name still gave her a thrill even after 6 years. "The town gossips were wrong," she said. "They said no cowboy would choose a woman with scars, but you did. You chose me without hesitation." "Because I saw what they could not," Callum said. "I saw you, and I will choose you every single day for the rest of my life." They sat together as the stars came out, one by one, lighting up the vast Nevada sky. The journey from that first meeting to this moment had not always been easy. There had been hardships and challenges, doubts and fears. But through it all, they had each other. And that, Willa thought, was worth more than all the unmarred skin in the world. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. In 1884, Callum bought an additional 100 acres, expanding their ranch and their herd. In 1885, Samuel started school in Pyramid City, riding into town each morning on his pony and returning each afternoon with stories and lessons to share. The twins were precocious and mischievous, keeping Willa constantly on her toes but filling the house with laughter. In 1886, tragedy struck when a harsh winter decimated many of the herds in the area. Callum and Willa lost nearly a third of their cattle, a devastating financial blow. But they had weathered hard times before, and they knew they would get through this as well. They tightened their belts, worked even harder, and by spring had begun to rebuild. It was during this difficult time that Willa saw the true measure of the community they had built. Neighbors came by with food and offers of help. Mr. Harrington, now elderly and mostly retired, gave them a dozen head of cattle from his own herd to help them recover. Even Margaret Sullivan, who had married a banker and moved to Virginia City, sent a letter with a generous donation and an apology for her cruel words all those years ago. "People can surprise you," Callum said, when Willa showed him Margaret's letter. "Sometimes they need time to grow and see their mistakes. Forgiveness is easier when you are happy," Willa said wisely, "and I am very happy." By 1887, the ranch had recovered and was thriving again. Samuel was 8 years old, a capable horseman who could already rope and herd with the best of the ranch hands. Rose and Lily were 5, inseparable and full of energy. Willa, now 34, looked at her life and marveled at how full it was. She had a loving husband, 3 wonderful children, a prosperous ranch, and a place in the community. All the things she had thought were lost to her forever had been returned tenfold. One day in June, Willa was working in the garden behind the house when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Looking up, she saw Callum riding toward the house at full gallop, which was unusual. He normally rode at a more sedate pace, conscious of not alarming the horses or kicking up too much dust. Willa stood, wiping her hands on her apron, concerned. Callum dismounted quickly and strode toward her, his face lit up with excitement. "You will not believe what just happened," he said, picking her up and spinning her around just as he had the day she agreed to marry him. "Callum Drake, put me down and tell me what has gotten into you," Willa laughed, but she was spinning too, caught up in his enthusiasm. He set her down but kept his hands on her waist, his blue eyes dancing. "Jonas Harrington just offered to sell me the rest of Silver Creek Ranch, all of it. He says he is getting too old to manage it, and his children have no interest in ranching. He wants to retire to California to be near his daughter, and he wants us to have the ranch. Says we have earned it, and he knows we will take good care of it." Willa gasped. Silver Creek Ranch was one of the largest and most successful operations in the area. Owning it would make them one of the most prosperous families in Pyramid City. "Callum, that is wonderful. Can we afford it?" "That is the best part," Callum said. "He is willing to sell it to us for a price we can manage, and he is offering generous terms on the payment. Says he would rather see it go to us for less money than to some stranger for more. He trusts us, Willa." They bought Silver Creek Ranch in the summer of 1887, and it changed everything. They moved into the main house, a spacious home with room for their growing family and visiting guests. They hired more ranch hands and expanded their operations. Callum proved to be an excellent ranch manager, fair but firm, and respected by everyone who worked for him. Willa managed the household and the finances, her careful stewardship ensuring the ranch remained profitable. The children thrived in their new home. Samuel had more responsibilities now, helping his father with the ranch work and learning the business from the ground up. Rose and Lily had their own ponies and spent their days exploring the land and getting into harmless mischief. In 1889, Willa gave birth to another son whom they named James. He was a quiet, thoughtful baby who seemed to observe everything with wise eyes. By 1890, Willa and Callum had been married for 13 years. They had built an empire from nothing, raised 4 children, and become pillars of the Pyramid City community. But more than any of their material success, they had built a marriage based on love and mutual respect. They still held hands when they walked together. Callum still told Willa she was beautiful, and she still blushed like a young girl when he did. They still stole kisses in the barn and shared dreams on the porch under the stars. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Willa caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was 37 now, and time had added laugh lines around her eyes and silver threads in her dark hair. The scars on her face and neck were still there, faded somewhat with time but still visible. She touched them gently, thinking about the young woman she had been, so afraid and ashamed. Callum came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About how far I have come," Willa said. "About how I used to believe these scars made me unlovable, and about how wrong I was." Callum wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "You were never unlovable," he said. "You were always worthy of love, it just took the right person to see it. And I am grateful every day that I was that person, that you let me love you and that you loved me back." Willa turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss full of all the love and gratitude she felt. "I used to think the fire took everything from me," she whispered against his lips. "But now I think maybe it led me to you, to this life. Maybe everything happens for a reason." "Maybe," Callum agreed. "Or maybe we just made the best of what we were given. Either way, I would not change a single thing." In the years that followed, the Drake family continued to grow and prosper. Samuel grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's amber eyes. In 1895, at the age of 16, he started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Emma who fit into the family perfectly. Rose and Lily grew into beautiful young women, identical in appearance but developing their own unique interests and personalities. Rose loved horses and spent hours training them, while Lily had a talent for painting and filled the house with her artwork. James, the youngest, was quiet and studious, always with his nose in a book. In 1897, Willa and Callum became grandparents for the first time when Samuel married Emma and they had a baby boy. Holding her grandson in her arms, Willa felt the circle of life completing itself. She thought about her own mother, who she had lost in the fire so many years ago, and wished she could have met her grandchildren. But she also felt her mother's presence in the love she gave her own children and now her grandchild. The turn of the century brought changes to Pyramid City and to the West in general. The wild frontier was becoming more civilized, with better roads and more commerce. But some things remained constant. The land was still harsh and beautiful, demanding respect and hard work from those who chose to make their lives there. And the Drake Ranch, as Silver Creek was now known, remained a symbol of success built on perseverance and love. In 1900, Callum and Willa celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary. They were in their late 40s now, their children grown or nearly so, their ranch prosperous and well-established. They threw a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the area. The house was full of laughter and music, food and dancing. Willa stood in the middle of it all, watching the people she loved enjoying themselves, and felt overwhelming joy. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Callum took Willa's hand and led her outside. The Nevada sky was brilliant with stars, the air cool and sweet. They walked to the rise where Callum had proposed all those years ago, the place that overlooked everything they had built together. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Callum asked, pulling Willa close. "I remember everything about that day," Willa said. "I remember being so nervous about the church social, and then so angry at Margaret Sullivan. I remember you defending me. And I remember coming here and feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could have something good in my life." "You have been the best thing in my life," Callum said seriously. "Every day with you has been a gift. Every challenge we faced together. Every joy we experienced was sweeter because we shared it. I love you, Willa Drake. I loved you the moment I walked into that general store and saw you. I loved you when I asked you to marry me. I loved you when we struggled and when we succeeded, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Willa felt tears sliding down her cheeks, happy tears that she did not bother to wipe away. "I love you too," she said. "You taught me that I was worthy of love. You chose me when everyone said you should not. You built this life with me, and it has been better than anything I ever dreamed." They stood together under the stars, two people who had defied expectations and created something beautiful. The scars that had once defined Willa's life were now just a small part of her story, a chapter that had led to everything else. She was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a rancher, and a beloved member of her community. She was strong and capable and loved beyond measure. As the years continued to pass, Willa and Callum remained devoted to each other and to their family. They saw Samuel and Emma have 3 more children, giving them 4 grandchildren to spoil and love. Rose married a horse trainer from California and moved to Sacramento, though she visited often. Lily stayed in Pyramid City and opened an art studio, her paintings becoming well known throughout Nevada. James went to university in San Francisco, studying law, but always came home for holidays and important family events. In 1905, Willa and Callum celebrated their 28th anniversary and Willa's 52nd birthday. They were grandparents to 6 now, with another grandchild on the way. The ranch was thriving under Samuel's management, as Callum had begun to step back and let his son take on more responsibility. Willa still kept the books and managed the household, but she also had more time for herself now, time to garden and read and spend with her grandchildren. One warm evening in September, Willa was sitting on the porch of the ranch house, shelling peas and watching her grandchildren play in the yard. Callum came out and sat beside her, taking her hand in his as he had done thousands of times before. His dark hair was mostly gray now, and there were deep lines around his blue eyes, but to Willa, He was still the handsome cowboy who had walked into the general store and seen her for who she really was. "What are you thinking about?" Callum asked, a question he had asked her countless times over the years. "About everything," Willa said, smiling. "About that scared young woman I used to be, hiding in the general store and believing she would never have a real life. About the first time you told me I had beautiful eyes and how shocked I was. About our wedding and our children and building this ranch. About all the moments, big and small, that have made up our life together. Any regrets?" Callum asked, though he was smiling because he already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Willa said firmly. "Well, maybe I regret not marrying you sooner, but we met when we met. Every moment has led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Callum raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his lips warm on her scarred skin. "They said no cowboy would choose a woman with scars," he said softly. "But they were wrong. I chose you without hesitation, and I would choose you again and again in every lifetime." "And I would choose you," Willa said, "always and forever." They sat together as the sun set over the land they loved, surrounded by the sounds of their grandchildren's laughter and the peaceful evening sounds of the ranch. It had been a long journey from that day in the general store to this moment, full of challenges and triumphs, sorrows and joys. But every step had been worth it. Willa thought about the fire that had scarred her body but not her spirit. She thought about the cruel words of people who judged her by her appearance. She thought about the loneliness and fear she had lived with for so long. And then she thought about Callum, who had seen past all of that to the woman underneath, who had loved her not despite her scars but along with them, seeing them as part of her story rather than a flaw to be overlooked. Their love had proven that true beauty is not about perfect skin or unmarred features. It is about kindness and courage, strength and compassion. It is about choosing to see the best in people and loving them for who they truly are. Callum had taught her that, and together they had built a life that reflected those values. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Willa leaned her head on Callum's shoulder, content in the warmth of his presence. Their grandchildren were being called inside by their parents, Samuel's voice mixing with Emma's as they rounded up the excited children. Smoke rose from the chimney of the bunkhouse where the ranch hands were settling in for the evening. Horses whinnied softly in the corral, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. This was home. This was family. This was love in its truest, most enduring form. And as Willa sat there with her husband of nearly 3 decades, she knew that she was blessed beyond measure. The young woman who had believed she would never be chosen had been wrong. She had been chosen by the best man she had ever known, and together they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. In the years to come, there would be more grandchildren, more joy, more challenges. Callum and Willa would face them all together, hand in hand as they always had. And when the time came, many years later, for them to leave this earth, they would do so knowing that their love had made a difference, that they had proven wrong all those people who said a scarred woman could not be loved, that they had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of tragedy. But that was still far in the future. For now, there was this moment, this perfect evening, this life they had built together. Callum squeezed Willa's hand gently, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation of love and understanding that needed no words. They had found each other against all odds, had loved each other through all circumstances, and had created a family and a legacy that would outlive them both. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars shone bright over the Nevada desert, Willa Kincaid Drake closed her eyes and gave thanks for every blessing in her life. For the fire that had scarred her but not broken her. For the people who had doubted her and made her stronger. for the children and grandchildren who filled her days with love and laughter. And most of all, for the cowboy who had walked into a general store one afternoon in 1876 and chosen her without hesitation, changing the course of her life forever. Their story was one of love triumphant, of seeing beyond surface appearances to the soul beneath, of building something lasting through dedication and devotion. It was a story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a reminder that true love knows no boundaries, and that the right person will see your worth no matter what scars you carry. And so they lived, Callum and Willa Drake, in their ranch in the Nevada desert, surrounded by family and prosperity, blessed with a love that had stood the test of time. They had proven that cowboys could and would choose women with scars, that love was about so much more than physical perfection, and that sometimes the greatest stories come from the most unlikely beginnings. Their love was a testament to the power of seeing people truly, of choosing kindness over judgment, and of believing that everyone deserves to be loved for exactly who they are. The Drake Ranch continued to prosper well into the new century, a symbol of what could be achieved through hard work, dedication, and love. Samuel proved to be an excellent rancher, expanding their operations and earning the respect of everyone in Pyramid City. His children grew up learning the values their grandparents had instilled, values of kindness and acceptance, of seeing beyond the surface to what really mattered. Rose returned from California in 1908 with her husband and 2 children, having decided that Nevada was where her heart truly belonged. She started a horse breeding program on a portion of the Drake Ranch land, producing some of the finest horses in the state. Lily's art studio became a gathering place for creative people throughout the region, and her paintings of the Nevada landscape were sought after by collectors. James finished his law degree and opened a practice in Pyramid City, using his education to help protect ranchers' rights and settle disputes fairly. By 1910, Willa and Callum were in their late 50s, slowing down a bit but still active and engaged in the ranch and their community. They had 11 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and the Drake name was synonymous with integrity and success throughout Nevada. But more than their material achievements, they were known for their love story, the tale of the scarred woman and the cowboy who chose her without hesitation. Young people in Pyramid City looked to them as an example of what marriage should be. Parents told their children the story to teach them about looking beyond appearances. And Willa, who had once hidden her scarred face in shame, now wore her scars proudly. A survivor who had overcome tragedy to build an extraordinary life. One day in the spring of 1911, Willa was working in her garden when a young woman approached the house. She was perhaps 20 years old, with a badly scarred arm from what looked like a burn injury. She stood at the gate nervously, clearly unsure if she should come closer. Willa set down her trowel and walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Can I help you?" she asked kindly. The young woman looked at Willa's scars and then down at her own arm. "My name is Clara," she said softly. "I heard about you from people in town, about how you found love even though you were scarred, and I wondered if you might talk to me. Because I do not think anyone will ever want me, and I do not know how to stop believing that." Willa's heart went out to this young woman, recognizing so much of her younger self in Clara's fear and shame. She opened the gate wide and gestured toward the porch. "Come sit with me," she said. "I have a story to tell you." They sat together for hours, Willa sharing her journey from tragedy to triumph, from believing she was unlovable to finding the deepest love imaginable. She talked about Callum and how he had seen her truly. She talked about building a life and a family, about finding her worth and refusing to let scars define her. And she watched as hope began to bloom in Clara's eyes, replacing the despair that had been there before. "You are not your scars," Willa said firmly, taking Clara's hand. "You are so much more than that. You are a person with dreams and hopes and so much to offer. The right person will see that. They will choose you not despite your scars but because of everything you are. And until that person comes along, you must choose yourself. You must decide that you are worthy of love and happiness, and you must live accordingly." Clara left that day with tears in her eyes, but they were hopeful tears. And Willa watched her go, knowing she had passed on the lesson that Callum had taught her all those years ago. The lesson that everyone deserves to be seen and loved for who they truly are. Over the years, Clara was not the only person who came to Willa seeking advice and encouragement. She became known as someone who understood pain and had overcome it, someone who could offer hope to those who felt hopeless. And she welcomed each person with the same kindness and wisdom, sharing her story and helping others find their own paths to healing and love. Callum watched his wife touch so many lives and fell in love with her all over again. She was in her 60s now, her dark hair completely silver, her face lined with age and scarred from the fire. But to him, she was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was strength and grace, wisdom and kindness, everything good and true. And he thanked God every day for leading him into that general store in Pyramid City so many years ago. In 1915, Callum and Willa celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary with a huge party at the ranch. All of their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends from throughout Nevada. There was food and music and dancing, and the joy was palpable. As the sun set and the party continued, Callum pulled Willa aside for a private moment. They walked to their favorite spot, the rise overlooking the ranch where so many important moments of their life had taken place. The land stretched out before them, golden in the setting sun, a testament to everything they had built together. 38 years, Callum said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. Both are true, Willa said, smiling. Time is strange like that, but I know this, every year with you has been a gift. You gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. You loved me when I could not love myself. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You chose me when everyone said you should not. And you have spent nearly 4 decades proving that you made the right choice. The only choice, Callum corrected gently. There was never anyone else for me, Willa. From the moment I saw you, I knew. And every day since has only confirmed what my heart already understood. You are my home, my partner, my love. Everything good in my life flows from you. They kissed as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Two people who had loved each other through decades of life, who had built an empire and a family, who had proven that true love conquers all. And as they walked back to the party hand in hand, they knew that whatever time they had left would be spent together, loving each other and the life they had created. The years continued to flow like the creek that ran through their property, steady and sure. There were joys and sorrows, as there always are in life. They lost friends and welcomed new grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The ranch evolved with the times, but the core values remained the same: hard work, integrity, kindness, and love. In 1920, on a beautiful spring morning, Willa woke to find Callum sitting on the edge of their bed, looking at her with those blue eyes that still made her heart skip a beat even after 43 years of marriage. "Good morning," she said, stretching and smiling. "You are up early." "I was watching you sleep," Callum admitted, "and thinking about how lucky I am, to have found you, to have loved you, to have lived this life with you. I am the richest man in Nevada, and it has nothing to do with cattle or land. It is all because of you." Willa sat up and took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth and strength that had sustained her through so many years. "We are lucky together," she said. "We found each other when we both needed it most, and we built something beautiful." They spent that day together, just the two of them, riding out to their favorite spots on the ranch and reminiscing about their life. They talked about their first meeting, their first kiss, their wedding day. They talked about the birth of each of their children and the joy of watching them grow. They talked about the hard times and the good times, the laughter and the tears, all the moments that had woven together to create the tapestry of their life. As the sun set that evening, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, Callum's arm around Willa and her head on his shoulder. It was a position they had assumed thousands of times over the years, as familiar and comforting as breathing. "No regrets," Callum said softly, and it was both a statement and a question. "No regrets," Willa confirmed. "Only gratitude for every moment, every memory, every day with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had loved each other through everything life could throw at them. They had proven that scars do not define a person's worth, that love sees beyond surface appearances, and that the right person will choose you without hesitation when they recognize your true value. Their story would live on in the memories of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It would be told and retold, a reminder that love is the most powerful force in the world, that kindness matters, that seeing people truly and choosing them fully can change lives and create legacies. Willa Kincaid Drake had started as a scarred young woman hiding in a general store, believing she would never be loved. But she had become a beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. A successful rancher and a pillar of her community. A woman who helped others find hope and healing. And all of it had started with one cowboy who walked into her life and chose her without hesitation, seeing not her scars but her soul. As Willa drifted off to sleep that night, safe in her husband's arms as she had been for over 4 decades, she smiled. Her life had been rich and full, blessed beyond measure, and at the heart of it all was love, pure and true and everlasting. The kind of love that they said no cowboy would give to a scarred woman. But Callum Drake had proven them all wrong, and in doing so, he had given Willa the greatest gift imaginable. A life truly lived, fully loved, and completely cherished. Their legacy would endure for generations, a testament to the power of choosing love over judgment, of seeing worth where others saw only flaws, of building a life on the foundation of mutual respect and devotion. The Drake Ranch would continue to thrive, passed down through their children to future generations, always carrying with it the story of its founders. A cowboy and a scarred woman who defied expectations and created something beautiful together. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the scars or the gossip or the doubts of others, but the love that had sustained them, the family they had built, and the legacy they would leave behind. Callum and Willa Drake had lived a love story for the ages, proving that true love knows no boundaries, and that everyone, regardless of their scars, deserves to be chosen and cherished. Their story was complete, a beautiful circle from that first meeting to a lifetime of love, and it would inspire others for generations to come.